We are living in historic times. The war that began between Israel and Iran on June 13th clearly will rearrange the geopolitical landscape of a region that has been at war, not just for 50 years, 100 years, but for centuries, for millennia. Imagine the Middle East at peace. No more tensions, no more battles, no more wars. Countries cooperating, cross-pollinating. Yes, something like that is right now on the horizon. Who would have believed? Now, like all transitions and all paradigm shifts, it usually comes with pain. So our hearts go out for the losses, for the deaths. But when you look at the bigger picture, there's so much to look forward to. Eliminating evil, eliminating threats, creates a climate, creates an environment, a fertile environment for growth. In addition, this also has cosmic, psychological, emotional, and spiritual implications. We are truly at the brink of a new era. Please join me for this special program, Rising Lion, the war that will define the future of the world. Hi, this is Simon Jacobson, and we will be discussing Rising Lion, the war that will define the future of the world. This program is dedicated in honor of the anniversary of Molly Wine and Jeffrey Silverman. We're living in historical times. No question about it. War is painful. Death is tragic. And yet, when you look at the overall picture, what are we talking about? The war that began between Israel and Iran with a surprise attack on June 13th, this past Friday, early morning, called Operation Rising Lion, clearly has the ability to reshape, realign the geopolitical climate of a region that had been suffering from tensions and wars and battles, not just for a half a century, not just a century, but for centuries, for millennia. Eliminating threats of genocide against Israel. Eliminating in general the existential threats that are posed by a radical regime like Iran will literally reshape the entire region and the entire world. Remember, this is a part of the world that exports oil. Imagine a world of peace in the Middle East, total peace. Not just between the Emirates and Bahrain, but all the countries of the Middle East with Israel. What kind of economic, technological opportunities it will offer, and how will it affect the rest of the world? So we're clearly on the threshold of a paradigm shift that's been long in the making, but appears to be coming to a new juncture. And I want to discuss that in detail. Because when you're living through history, you don't always notice it. You don't see the forest from the trees, or see the trees from the forest, however the expression goes, because you're going through the minutia. But when you step back and you look at this region and what has been happening over the years and the possibilities, you see a new world order. So let's go back. I'll work my way back from where we are to the past, we'll say, half a century, and then work our way back. I'm going to go back thousands of years, because if you want to understand the present and the future, you have to understand the past, the history, the roots of it all. The historical, spiritual, psychological roots of these conflicts. So going back to 1979, when Iran, the Shah of Iran was overthrown, taken over by the mullahs, by Ayatollahs, Khomeini, turned into a radical Islamic fanatical Shiite regime. Iran has become the number one terrorist sponsor of terrorism around the world. And terrorism is not just attacking Israel. If you look at the documentation, you will not believe in how many different ways they've been trying to upend and disrupt our Western world, Western civilization. Now, God has also blessed that region with oil. Oil gives you money. Money gives you power. So the call for the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people by Iran is far more than that. We have to even understand what drives that. Why? Well, like when it came to the Nazis, did we understand why they hated Jews that much? But still, there are ways to analyze it, and we'll discuss that as well. So we're talking about disruption. Besides the Shiite-Sunni battles, Shiites are a minority, but Iran is a Shiite country controlled by Shiites. Saudi Arabia, just for the record, is Sunni. There's also Israel right in between there all. Iran has become the sponsor of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. Until Syria's fall just recently, they really much controlled that country. And things did not look good, especially not for Israel, especially not for the free world, Israel being the only democracy in that region. And as they began to build their nuclear arsenal, it became even more threatening, to the point that Israel finally said, enough is enough. We can't have such an existential threat. So this covers the last 50 years, a little less than 50 years. But prior to that, it wasn't like the region was exactly at peace either. We know the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, that goes back to 1974, prior to that 1967, of course 1948. But even before that, this region has suffered more battles than any other place in the world. And all around this holy promised land in the Bible called Israel. Jerusalem. So let's broaden the picture now, the historical picture. The battles that have raged there. So through the Middle Ages, there were times that the Christians controlled that part of the world, and there were times that the Muslims controlled it. Of course, the Ottoman Empire. But before the Ottoman Empire were the Crusades, and exchange hands and the wars over this piece of land, the Holy Land. And the Jews were always in the middle. Taking it even broader, we go back to the time of the first temple, second temple, let's start with the second temple, destroyed by the Romans almost 2,000 years ago. And then they took control. The Romans, essentially, the ancestors of the Western Christian Roman world. Before that, we had the Persians who controlled the land. After that, there were the Greeks. Before the Persians were the Babylonians, and they destroyed the first temple. So the Jews were there for close to around 1,000 years with two temples. The first temple destroyed by the Babylonians, the second by the Romans, then they were exiled. But the Jews never really left. They were exiled, they were expelled. But they always kept returning. There were always some Jews there because it was the Jewish land, the Holy Land. Promised as promised, the promised land as promised to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob in the Bible. So now let's go further back. After the Jews were exiled and enslaved by the Egyptians, now we're talking over 3,000 years ago, 3,337 years ago to be exact, the Exodus. Where were they living before that? So Jacob and his father Isaac and his father Abraham and their wives Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah were living in Israel. Abraham arrived to Israel. This is the story, the biblical story. We're talking about now close to almost 4,000 years ago, 3,800 years ago. And this was the land given to him by God, as the Bible tells us. He lived there, but then due to the famine, Jacob and his children ended up going to Egypt. They get enslaved there, the children and grandchildren, for 210 years. They finally come out, as the Bible tells us, and they go on a trek, on a journey, 40 years in the wilderness. Where? Back to the Promised Land. So look how the Promised Land, Israel, remains so central, and all the wars being fought over it. So the question is, what's behind these wars? Is it because Israel has so many powerful, rich natural resources? Is it gold, diamonds, oil? Actually, some other countries have many more natural resources. What is it about this land? And why is it a promised land and a holy land? If you don't answer that question, you can never get to the bottom of the conflicts. People fight over something that they find as valuable. You don't see wars being fought over the Sahara Desert or other places in the world quite like this. So the secret lies in the very word, the name of this country is called Israel, Eretz Yisrael. And Jerusalem, the name of its capital, Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. What does Yisrael mean? The Bible tells us. It's also connected to a war. When Jacob is returning home, back to Israel again, from spending 20 years building his family in Haran, which is more like northeast from Israel, by his uncle, his shrewd and criminal uncle Laban. And on his way back to Israel, he encounters that mysterious story, the mysterious stranger that wrestles with him all night, called the angel of Esau, his twin brother. They wrestle. And Jacob prevails. However, right as the dawn breaks, Esau's angel displaces the hip of Jacob. And Jacob will not let go of him. He says, let me go. I have to go back to my work. And Jacob says, I will let you go once you bless me. Who's blessing him? His archenemy. And what's the blessing that he gives? He says, what is your name? He says, Jacob. From now on, your name will be Israel, Yisrael. Because you have wrestled with God, meaning God's angel, and with humans, and you have prevailed. That's where the word Yisrael comes from. Wrestling, fighting with a world, with people, with angels that oppose you, and prevailing. What does Yerushalayim mean? Jerusalem is made up of two words. Yerushalayim, complete peace. Well, I should say, I know you correct myself. Shalom means complete, but it also means peace. Shalom. Yerushalayim means complete reverence. Yira is reverence, Shalom is complete. Complete reverence. Reverence of a transcendent force in our lives, God. And that's indeed when Jacob falls asleep and has his famous dream, the Jacob's ladder. And he wakes up and realizes where he is. He says, this is a gate to heaven, an interface between heaven and earth. That's what Israel is. That's what Jerusalem is. So of course everyone wants control over this interface. Can you imagine finding the place where you can get to heaven the easiest? The Holy Land? That's the place you want to control. And indeed, all blessings come from that place, as the Bible tells us, that God says to Abraham, those that bless you shall be blessed. So everybody wants control over these blessings, over this source. It's even more than natural, physical resources. It's spiritual resources. And the power to prevail. Israel. So you see, built into it is battles. Battle between what? So what did the battle between Jacob and the angel represent? Esau, his brother, and Jacob were twins. As the Bible tells us, the Torah tells us, that from pregnancy they were already wrestling with each other in their mother's womb. And when she was suffering, she asked God, and God responded, because you have two nations within you. You have two archetypes. One that represents the material world and one represents the spiritual world. One is a warrior. Esav, Ish Melchama, Yedet Sayed, a warrior, an expert hunter. And the other was a scholar. Yaakov was Yeshiv, Ish Tom Yeshiv Ahalim, a pure, sincere, innocent man, spiritual man, who dwelled in the tents, was a scholar. We all have within us a Jacob and an Esav. And they were actually, in reality, two individuals, brothers, twins. Yet they're two different forces, and they're at battle with each other. The war between matter and spirit. The truth is, we need them both. But initially, there is tension between them. And the Torah Jewish approach is to relieve the tension between matter and spirit, between materialism and spirituality, between selfishness that can come from materialism and selflessness, not by destroying one or the other, but by reconciling, by spiritualizing the material. And that's what they fought over. Who's going to be in control? And that was the wrestling angel with Jacob. And then he said to him, you've prevailed. Yes, we were wounded in the process, the displaced hip. But one day that will be healed as well. And that is the root of all the battles. The war between what does God want of us and living in a material world. When you think about it, Esau becomes the ancestor, as the commentaries explain, his grandson was Rami, the ancestor of the Roman, Western, and then Christian world. Yishmael, his father-in-law and also uncle, Yishmael, the brother of Isaac, son of Abraham, is the ancestor of the Arab and later Muslim world. And of course, Isaac and Jacob are the ancestors of the Jewish world. And they were fighting back in the tent of Abraham almost 4,000 years ago. And they've been continuing to fight over the generations. The battles between the Christians and the Jews, between the Arabs and Muslims and the Jews, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Romans. So if you think about it, think of the coordinates of these pieces, they're all in play. And the question is who and how will we make our peace between God and existence? So Abraham, the father of all nations, he set in motion a whole process, and he said, it's going to be a bit difficult war. However, there are certain methods. Love everyone unconditionally. He prays for infidels. That's why I'm always shocked when I hear Muslim extremists crying, kill the infidels in the West. The great Satan of the United States, the small Satan of Israel. Their grandfather Abraham, I once did a video a while back to my dear brothers, cousins, Muslims, and I asked the question, your grandfather Abraham, what would he say to you when the way you're behaving? Why are you threatening? Why are you attacking? Even if you disagree, find a way to inspire as Abraham did. But Yishmael, the ancestor of the Arab Muslim world, is, as the Bible says, he's a wild man. He has tremendous passion. And being a son of Abraham is driven by religious fervor. But religious fervor can be very dangerous if it's not humbled if it's not balanced and tempered with a measure of humility. A balance. Because faith in God expects things. We want to create a beautiful world. But when you see a world that, say, opposes that, a materialistic world, a decadent world, it's easy to just burn all the enemies. Judaism says no. Abraham says no. You don't burn them, you transform them. And this has been the essence of the Muslim extremism, is that the Jewish people, and for that matter the Christians, you find often they'll talk about the Crusader Zionist conspiracy. Where's that come from? Zionist is Jewish, Crusader is Christian or Rome, and the Muslims fighting that. We will bring God to the world, not you. You're infidels. And the Christians argue the same thing when the Romans destroyed the temple. They weren't Christians yet. But everybody wants to control it. But ultimately, the only way is to bring God to the world, morality to the world, is through peace, through love. So when you think of all these moving pieces and history unfolding and all the battles that were fought, and of recent, let's go back a little more than 100 years ago when the Ottoman Empire still controlled that region, or most of it. And then the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and the British Empire took over. And then in 1948, the partition with the Jews given control over their piece of land. The wars just continued to rage exactly as they were always there before. It didn't start in 1948, as I just spelled out. And I didn't spell out even half of it, just the main milestones. And all around this country called Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, the Holy Land, the interface between heaven and earth, Jerusalem, that carries the formula, the secret to complete reverence. But a reverence that is not radical, a reverence that is not destructive. So though all the players may not be aware consciously of these forces, that's what's behind the scenes. And I've spoken about this at length, which I'm not going to go into right now. Especially I remember reading Ibn Sa'd's, who was one of the fathers of Muslim fundamentalism, describing how Islam has to be the dominant force and has to even go to jihad, to war against the infidels, so to speak, especially of the Christians, especially of the Jews. So I'm not going to go into all the details. You can look it up at meaningfullife.com. But I will say that whether they're conscious or not conscious, these forces at work will also explain some of the hatred you see and the extremism. So by no means am I suggesting that everything going on in Israel is perfect. But Israel is not called for the extermination and the genocide of any country. Put down your arms and Israel will be totally at peace with you. If Israel puts down its arms, it will be attacked and try to be destroyed, God forbid. So when you understand so-called the soul, the forces at work, the roots of these conflicts, then you can understand where we are right now. So where are we? Israel has become a strong nation, a strong empire, financially, technologically, and even spiritually. Much more to grow. Its population has grown. It's a place of prosperity. And with the Abraham Accords, peace was made with some of the countries, some of the Arab Muslim countries. But it's not over. Iran remained the dominant opposition. Again, whether conscious or not conscious, I don't think most Iranians even want to fight a war. But the Ayatollahs, the religious fanatics and radicals, they definitely do. And they see it as existential as well. They see it as spiritual. They see this is what God wants. So now eliminating that threat, not just for Israel, but for the world, is history in the making, my friends. It means we're finally coming to a conclusion. That doesn't mean everything will be perfect, but this is the last obstacle. And if you think about it, oddly, Though October 7th was a terrible tragedy, but all this would not have happened had October 7th not happened by a proxy of Iran. Hamas. And then the eradication of Hezbollah in Lebanon, Syria falling, all proxies and all under the control of Iran. And now, finally, the head of the snake itself, Iran itself. So when you connect the dots, you say to yourself, oh, wow, this can be the final frontier. Not could, will be. Iran will be eradicated as an evil empire. What happens to their regime is going to be up to them. Hopefully, they will learn their lessons and not try to rebuild criminal and violent and destructive arsenals, but they'll make their peace. Lebanon will make its peace with Israel. Syria will make its peace. Saudi Arabia will make its peace. And yes, we are literally at the threshold of a new era. Will it come all smoothly? Nothing comes smoothly, but the trajectory is very clear. So we go back to Abraham, getting back to Abraham, having Ishmael and Isaac, both children of his. Isaac having Esau and Jacob children. The ultimate experience of Yisrael, that the victory and prevailing of good over selfishness, spiritualizing a material world, experiencing pure and complete reverence, Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, and Yisrael, that the spirit prevails in its battles over materialism, over a physical world. A life of purpose. A life, as Isaiah the prophet says, where there'll be no longer evil and destruction because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. The many prophecies that the swords will be turned into plowshares and the weapons into pruning hooks. A spiritual revolution. That's where we're headed. And the clearer we are about it, the faster it will happen, because we're all part of this. This isn't just interesting information. We are part of the unfolding drama, how we behave, because we have these battles within ourselves. We have an animal soul, a divine soul. We have our selfish voice, the id, and we have our selfless voice, the noble voice. So we have all these forces at work within us. We have the promised land within us, and we have those the voice that challenges it. We have the pure reverence, the complete reverence of Jerusalem within us, and again, the adversarial forces that battle with that. So both on a personal level, on a cosmic level, on a historical level, on a psychological and emotional level, spiritual level, it's all coming to a head. That's how we should look at these events. Obviously, what has to be done on the ground needs to be done on the ground or in the air, but there's a bigger picture emerging. So it's time to educate yourself and learn about it, and learn how it plays itself out in our individual lives. I'm going to make sure that this program is translated into Arabic and Farsi and other languages, because this is a message we all have to hear. And it's the story of history. So here we are in the year 2025, in the Hebrew year 5785. And we literally are seeing with our own eyes the unfolding of a new chapter in history, one that can lead us into a completely glorious future, a messianic age, a utopian age. And I'm not being naive. There's no question that we have that possibility. But we need to implement it. We need to see it clearly. And yes, we have to get through the humps and the challenges that are still ahead of us. So God should protect all the innocent men, women, and children in Israel, all innocent men, women, and children in Iran, and everywhere else in the world. Protect those that are fighting the good cause. And may this victory come quickly, rising lion. A lion represents both things, power and strength. It can be used in the negative, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon that destroyed the first temple, was compared to a lion. But so is God compared to a lion. And indeed, the Medrash says that the lion that destroyed the temple will be vanquished in the month of the lion, month of Leo, of the saddest month of the Jewish calendar, will be transformed. And it's on condition that the lion called God will rebuild the temple called the lion in the month of the lion. So rising lion, a show of strength and courage in holiness, in sanctity, in good things, a fight with passion for good, to counter the lion of destruction. That's where we are at now. And each of us, as I said, is part of this unfolding story. Iran is Persia of old. The name Persia was changed in the mid-20th century. Persia of old played a tremendous role. Persia was a powerful empire, especially during the time between the first and second temples. The story of Achashverosh, the story of Purim. And indeed, tonight is the 23rd day of the Hebrew month of Sivan, which the book of Esther, the story of Persia of old, tells us is the day when Achashverosh decreed that the Jewish people, Yisrael, will prevail against their enemies that wanted to kill them. They wanted a total genocide, destruction of all Jews, literally like the destruction of all Jews, just like the leaders of Iran called for the destruction of Israel. And on this day, in the time of the old Persian Empire, the Jews were empowered and given the title to eliminate those enemies. And that's why it says that Mordechai walked out with that decree in joy. The Jewish people had light and joy and jubilation and celebration. And every year on the 23rd of Sivan, this repeats itself. May that be now, immediately. And the entire world, in addition to Israel, will be able to celebrate together. And Iranian people will be freed from the radicalism, from the oppression that they've suffered. And may we all experience this peace in the fullest possible way, with joy. End to all pain and suffering and tragedy. And the beginning of a new era, the era of peace, an era where no more evil and destruction, because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. Thank you so much. This has been Simon Jacobson. If this message is meaningful to you, please share with others. Love to hear your thoughts, your feedbacks, your comments. Please subscribe to our offerings, meaningfullife.com, our YouTube channel. Be blessed. May the Jewish and Israel be blessed. May the entire world be blessed. And may we see this peace immediately in our times.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate. This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.